Ever gotten dumped so hard it felt like a slap from reality, like you got replaced faster than a phone with a cracked screen? Spent endless nights staring at your phone like a dog waiting for its owner to come home, only to realize that message isn't coming. Yeah, that sucks. But guess what's even worse? It's not the breakup, the rejection, or even seeing her all smiles with someone else. The worst part is facing the truth. You were never that important to her. While you're drowning in self-pity, she's out there living her life like you're just a random footnote in her story. And why is that? Because you gave too much damn importance. Now, for the reality check nobody else wants to say to your face. Women don't respect men who walk around in a constant state of neediness. They don't miss the guy who's always there, drooling for attention. They don't lose sleep over someone so predictable, clingy, and, sorry to say, emotionally weak. That is exactly why you're hurting right now. You made her the center of your universe, and guess what? She kicked you out of orbit without even looking back. But from here on out, that ends. Today is the day your sad, needy self dies, and in its place, the Iceman is born. Today, you learn how to be emotionally unbreakable. You learn that the only thing more attractive than a detached man is a unicorn with a Harvard degree. You become the kind of guy who doesn't need them. And ironically, that's the only kind they can't forget. So buckle up. Because right here, right now, your transformation from pitiful reject to at least a halfway decent human being begins. But before we dive in, a quick heads up. This video only showed up in your feed because somebody out there wasn't a cheapskate and gave it a like. So do your part, like, subscribe, and drop a thanks in the comments. Otherwise, the algorithm is gonna bury this masterpiece in digital limbo. No more beating around the bush. Let's cut to the chase. The deadly mistake. Why you always end up screwed. Wanna know why you're here listening to this? Because you've been dumped more times than a city bus seat. You've done a grand tour of emotional hell thinking you found the one, only to discover she turned out to be the one for some other guy the next week. And the worst part? You have no clue why this keeps happening. Pay attention. You're hurting because you care way more than you should. Every time you jump headfirst into a relationship without even checking if there's water in the pool, you're basically signing an invisible contract that says, "Here, take full control of my happiness." And once you give someone that power, they can decide to keep you or dump you like an outdated app. And in your case, you got dumped. Again. Now tell me, how many times have you seen this scenario play out? How many times does the guy who does everything for a woman get tossed aside, while the dude who can barely remember her name is the one she can't stop thinking about? That's not bad luck, buddy, that's a pattern. You were taught that being attentive, present, and caring would make you a keeper. That if you showed her how special she was, she'd finally see your worth. Sounds sweet, right? But here's the problem. Women don't get turned on by predictability. What happens when you're always there, available, sending your good morning and good night texts every single day like clockwork? She gets bored. She sees you as a guaranteed prize, and you know what's guaranteed in life? Boredom. Then you think that if you just stick around long enough, keep being the devoted, understanding guy, one day she'll open her eyes and realize you're the right choice. Spoiler alert, she never wakes up, because the predictable guy doesn't spark emotion, doesn't stir desire, and doesn't get missed. That's why you keep getting hurt. You think love is built on sacrifice, but in the real game, the one who overinvests loses. Now you've got two choices. Keep collecting heartbreaks, or finally figure out the rules of this game and learn how to play it right. If you choose the second option, get ready. Because today is the start of your transformation. Today, the Iceman is born. And I'm gonna show you exactly how to make it happen. The transformation, how to become the Iceman. Alright, you get why you've been screwed over all this time. Now it's time to stop being the emotional punching bag and become the guy who never gets played again. But before you start thinking this means turning into some cold-blooded sociopath, let's get one thing straight. This isn't about pretending you don't feel anything. It's about having complete control. You gotta be the guy who feels but isn't a slave to his emotions. Who can love, but never depend on anybody else's love? Who can like a woman, but never, under any circumstances, put her above himself? To get there are 3 core rules that'll change how you see relationships in your entire life. Rule 1. Keep your emotions in check. Ever notice how some guys seem unshakable? Nothing rattles them, nothing phases them, and strangely enough, those are the ones women chase the hardest. That's because men who control their emotions are a rare breed. What do most guys do? They flip out, cling, and beg for attention like a needy golden retriever. Now imagine the opposite. You find out she went out with some other guy and you're unbothered. She ghosts you for months and then hits you with a "Hey stranger," and you're unmoved. She tests you, provokes you, plays mind games, threatens to leave, and you stay cool, calm, and collected. What happens? She spirals into panic mode, because silence and indifference hurt more than any tearful drama. If she notices you can live without her, the tables turn instantly. But if she senses even the slightest emotional crack, you can forget it. You're back to being her little toy. Congrats! You're on the verge of moving from emotional puppy to wild stallion no one can tame. But it only works if you train your mind to be unshakable. Here are the basics for not becoming a doormat again. Never react impulsively. Take a breath, count to 10, and remember, it's never as urgent as it seems. Showing desperation. Big no. Never go fishing for explanations. If she disappears, cools off, or trades you in for someone else, accept it. Asking what happened is basically begging for another slap in the face. Use silence as your weapon. Silence speaks louder than any "we need to talk" sermon. If you don't explain yourself, you hold the power. Without self-control, you'll always be manipulated. If you don't control your emotions, trust me, someone else will. Now that your mind is undergoing its emotional deep freeze, let's move on to the next rule. Rule 2. Have a purpose greater than any woman. Want to know the difference between an unforgettable man and a disposable one? Where he places his focus. Most guys organize their whole life around women. They hop from relationship to relationship like they're collecting repeat stickers in an album that never gets finished. They need to be with someone to feel complete. And guess what? That's exactly why they keep losing. Now think of the opposite. The guy who has a mission, who's building something bigger than any relationship. That guy doesn't need female validation, and that's precisely why they chase him. Women are naturally drawn to men with something bigger going on in their lives. Men too busy for emotional games. So, if you really want to be the Iceman, ask yourself right now, what matters more to you than any woman? Your money? Your body? Your knowledge? Your legacy? If the answer is nothing, then congrats, you just identified your first problem. The Iceman doesn't waste time on cheap emotional melodrama because he's busy leveling up. And the biggest irony? Once you stop making women your top priority, they start making you theirs. We've got one last pillar to go, and it might be the most important of all. Rule 3. Never depend on female affection. Here's the brutal truth most men can't handle. Women's love is conditional. They don't love the way men do. Their love has an expiration date, and it's tied directly to your value. If you're strong, emotionally independent, and have something to offer, her love is intense. If you become weak, needy, and insecure, that love disappears faster than your paycheck on bill day. That's exactly why you can't depend on it. Because the minute you start depending, you lose. The Iceman knows that any relationship can end at any moment. He never clings to the point of losing control of his own life. How to build your emotional shield? See relationships as a bonus, not a necessity. If it ends, you move on like nothing happened. No drama. Keep your social circle strong. The friend who vanishes when he's dating is just sad. Don't revolve your entire life around one person. Always keep an abundance mindset. There are billions of women on the planet. You really think one of them defines your worth? Once you embrace this rule, you'll never suffer over love again. Because now, you're no longer that needy, predictable guy waiting to be discarded. Now you're unbreakable. Now you're the Iceman! The final test. How to know if you've become the Iceman. Congrats, warrior. If you've made it this far, you already know exactly what you need to do to avoid ever being treated like an emotional doormat again. But knowing isn't enough, because there's a huge gap between understanding the theory and actually living it. And there's only one way to tell if you've truly made the leap from fragile man to Iceman: the final test. This test measures your emotional resistance. It's gonna show whether you're still the same old pushover or if you've become truly unbreakable.
Pay attention.
If you fail these tests, it means you're still not ready. But if you pass, trust me, you'll never lose sleep over a woman again. Test 1. Your ex texts you after months. Do you feel anything? Here's the classic scenario. You got dumped, kicked to the curb, treated like you were nothing. You spent nights replaying memories while she was out living her best life without a second thought. Then one day, boom, she pops up out of nowhere with the classic, "Hey stranger, what now?" If your heart skipped a beat, if your mind started racing, if you felt that mix of relief and anxiety, you failed. It means you're still emotionally chained. The Iceman? He sees the message, smirks to himself, and goes on with his day. Maybe he doesn't even reply, because he's already moved on. And ironically, that chilling lack of response makes her come back even harder. If you passed, congrats. Let's move on to the next. Test 2. You see the woman who rejected you with another guy. Does it get to you? This one's rough. You're going about your life and suddenly, there she is, looking great, laughing, having the time of her life with some new guy on her arm. Maybe he's an upgrade, maybe he's a total loser. Either way, it doesn't matter. What matters is, what do you feel in that moment? If you felt that familiar punch in the gut, if your mood went south, if you started replaying, "Where did I go wrong?" in your head, congrats, you failed. That means you still care. Now the Iceman, he sees that scene and keeps it moving. He genuinely couldn't care less because his past doesn't rule his present. If the sight of your ex with somebody else still shakes you up, you're not there yet. Now the final test, the toughest one of all.
Test 3. Can you go a month without sex or begging for attention?
True emotional independence isn't just about one woman. It's about not being driven by your urges, your need for validation, or your fear of being alone. Here's the challenge. Can you go a whole month without sex? Without sending desperate messages to someone just to fill a void? Without stalking your ex? Without scrambling for any scrap of female attention? If the answer is no, guess what? You're still chained to your emotions. The Iceman doesn't need sex to feel whole. He doesn't beg for female approval to feel validated. If he wants something, he goes for it by choice, not out of desperation. The final verdict. If you aced all 3 tests, congrats, you've transcended. You're no longer just some random guy. You've become the kind of man women never forget. If you failed, well, you've still got some work to do. Now that you've either passed the test or realized you need more practice, let's talk about the last big lesson. Listen up, because this will shape the rest of your life. Being the Iceman isn't a trick. It's not a cheap tactic to manipulate women. Being the Iceman is a lifestyle. From today onward, you'll never again be a hostage to your emotions. You'll never again put a woman above yourself. You'll never again rely on a woman's love to feel complete. You'll never again hand over the keys of your happiness to someone else. Because here's the simple truth. The world respects men who are unbreakable. And now you're part of that select group. What happens next? Now your life changes. Now you realize everything you used to do, chasing too hard, showing too much, caring more than you should, was precisely what made women lose interest. Now they start seeing you in a whole new light. Because now you don't need them anymore. And, ironically, that's the biggest secret of all. The Iceman never begs for love. But for that very reason, he becomes the kind of man they just can't ignore. Because now, you're rare. You're strong. You're a challenge. And a challenge is always hotter than some predictable guy who bows down for attention. The final choice. At this point, you've got 2 paths. Keep being the guy who cries himself to sleep over love disposable, replaceable, predictable. Or become legendary, because the Iceman doesn't need anyone, but everyone wants to be around him.